I discovered the calculated deception behind my wife's pregnancy on a Tuesday evening, and that moment transformed me from a trusting husband into a methodical record keeper. My name is Logan Price, and I'm 33 years old. I spend my days gathering evidence in our suburban home while maintaining a careful distance. The betrayal wasn't a single misstep. It was an orchestrated plan involving my wife Noelle and her boss Colin, designed to trap me into fathering another man's child. My fingers traced hotel receipts and appointment records, each document reinforcing the truth I never wanted to find. Marriage was supposed to be our fortress of honesty, even when the truth hurt. Instead of lashing out, I chose the path of documented facts and legal precision. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled into our driveway just after 6, the autumn sun already dipping below the roofline. The porch light clicked on automatically. Noelle must have heard my car. We'd installed those motion sensors together last spring, back when home improvements were still our shared language of love. Walking through the front door, I caught the scent of her vanilla lavender candle, the one she only lit for special occasions. Noelle stood at the kitchen island, hands clasped together, a peculiar smile playing across her face. Something felt off about her expression, but I couldn't place why. "I have news," she said, sliding a black and white photo across the granite counter. My heart stuttered as I recognized the grainy ultrasound image. "You're pregnant?" The words came out hollow, even as I tried to match her enthusiasm. "We're pregnant," she corrected, coming around to wrap her arms around my waist. "About 8 weeks along." 8 weeks. The number hit me like a blow to the chest. My mind snapped to the calendar I kept meticulously updated on my phone. Client meetings, depositions, business trips. Especially that week-long conference in Seattle where I'd presented our firm's latest findings. I forced my hands to remain steady as I picked up the ultrasound. "When did you find out?" "Just got the confirmation today. I wanted to wait until I was sure before telling you." She squeezed me tighter. "Aren't you excited?" I made a non-committal sound, my thoughts racing through dates and timelines. The math wasn't adding up, and my stomach knew it before my brain could fully process why. Hours later, after a dinner I barely tasted, I found Noelle on the third-floor landing of our apartment building. She often went there to make phone calls, claiming the reception was better. The space felt confined now, trapped between floors with nowhere to deflect the question burning in my throat. "Who's the father, Noelle?" She turned, her face shifting from surprise to hurt in an instant. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She stepped forward and kissed my cheek, like I was being silly. "Logan, honey, what kind of question is that? You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I kept my voice level, though my pulse hammered in my ears. "Because the timing—" "Stop it." Her tone sharpened. "I can't believe you'd even suggest something like that. I thought you'd be happy about this." I watched her retreat down the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Back in our kitchen, the ultrasound still lay on the counter where I'd left it. I picked it up again, forcing myself to look at the date stamp in the corner. Then I opened my phone's calendar, scrolling back through the weeks. The numbers stared back at me, cold and unforgiving. I'd been 2,000 miles away when our child would have been conceived. Except it wasn't our child at all, was it? My fingers clenched around the edge of the counter as I studied the grainy image, seeing it now for what it truly was. Not a celebration, but evidence. The next morning I sat at my desk before sunrise, legal pad in front of me. The house was still quiet. Noelle wouldn't be up for another hour. My pen moved across the yellow paper with determined precision. No insurance changes without proof, no hospital forms, no signatures of any kind. I underlined each item twice, then added, "Document everything." The rules weren't just boundaries, they were armor. I remembered how my father used to say that writing something down was the first step to making it real. The memory of his voice steadied my hand as I folded the paper and tucked it into my wallet. At work, I buried myself in case files and client meetings. My voice stayed professional, my expressions measured, but beneath that calm surface, my mind wouldn't stop churning through possibilities. During lunch, I caught myself staring at my computer screen, not seeing the documents in front of me, just dates and timelines spinning behind my eyes. "You okay there, Price?" my colleague Jeff asked, passing by my office. "Just focused," I answered, the lie tasting bitter but necessary. The workday crawled by. I drove home on autopilot, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. Inside our apartment, Noelle had already left for her evening yoga class, her Tuesday routine for the past year. I moved through the living room, straightening magazines, my old habit of tidying when stressed taking over. That's when I saw it, her tablet, carelessly left on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a new message notification. I shouldn't look, I told myself. But the same instinct that had caught those misaligned dates now pulled me toward the device. The tablet wasn't locked. Noelle had always been casual with her passwords, claiming she had nothing to hide. I opened her messaging app and my throat went dry. There they were, dozens of exchanges with Colin Marks, her company manager, spanning the past few months. Timing the offsite perfectly, one message read from Colin, "Keep this between us for now." Noelle's response, "Of course." No one suspects anything. My pulse slowed to an icy rhythm as I scrolled through their conversation. The timestamps showed late-night messages, quick deletions, careful planning. I found myself breathing too carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter what little control I had left. In her email trash folder, she never emptied it, I found the final piece, a hotel receipt from the Pine Ridge Resort, dated exactly when conception would have happened. The company retreat. While I'd been in Seattle presenting to clients, my wife had been... I took screenshots, sent them to my secure email, then methodically erased all traces of my presence from the tablet's history. Placing it back exactly as I'd found it, I walked to our bedroom window. Outside, the city lights blurred into a cold constellation of other people's lives, other people's truths. The evidence was there now, digital breadcrumbs leading to a truth I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass, and I saw something shift in my own eyes. Suspicion hardening into certainty, pain transforming into purpose. I called Nate the next morning, my voice carefully neutral as I asked to meet. We'd stayed close since college, and he'd built a solid reputation as a family attorney, the kind of lawyer you want when things get messy. "Logan," he said, checking his watch as he slid into the booth at Riverside Coffee. "Been a while. You sounded different on the phone." The cafe buzzed with mid-morning activity, laptops open, conversations flowing. I remembered countless study sessions here during law school, Nate explaining case precedents while I downed too much caffeine. Now, the familiar setting felt surreal, like watching an old movie with new eyes. I laid out the timeline, showing him the screenshots and my travel records. His expression stayed professional, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "There's something else you need to know," Nate said, leaning forward. "In our state, if you don't contest paternity before the birth, you're legally presumed to be the father. Doesn't matter what comes after." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "How long do we have?" "Based on the dates you showed me?" He did some quick math. 8 weeks, tops. And Logan..." He paused, making sure I was looking directly at him. "Once that clock runs out, it's nearly impossible to reverse." The cafe's espresso machine hissed, making me flinch. 8 weeks. The weight of that deadline settled into my chest like cold lead. "What's our first move?" I kept my voice steady, though my hands wanted to shake. "DNA test," Nate said without hesitation. "But it has to be done right. Chain of custody, proper documentation. I know someone, Dr. Patel at Central Labs. He's thorough, respected. His signature carries weight in court." I nodded, already pulling out my phone. "I'll call now." 3 hours later, I sat in Dr. Arjun Patel's office, the sterile smell of the lab burning my nostrils. He was exactly as Nate described, precise, professional, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The process is non-invasive," Dr. Patel explained, laying out forms. "We'll need your sample today, and we can coordinate with your wife's doctor for the prenatal specimen." He paused, his pen hovering over the paperwork. "Mr. Price, I understand the sensitivity of this situation. Every step will be documented, witnessed, and sealed. My signature will ensure these results stand up to any legal scrutiny." I signed where indicated, each stroke of the pen feeling like another step toward an irreversible truth. Dr. Patel guided me through the collection process, his movements methodical, explaining each step as he sealed and labeled the samples. "Results typically take 5 business days," he said, placing the final form in a manila envelope. "But given the circumstances, I'll expedite this personally." I stood to leave, the envelope heavy under my arm. The automatic doors of the lab whispered shut behind me, and I found myself staring at my reflection in the tinted glass. Somewhere in that building, in one of those carefully labeled vials, was the truth that would either set me free or shatter what remained of my marriage. 5 days after my visit to Central Labs, Dr. Patel's office called. I picked up the results during my lunch break, though food was the last thing on my mind. The manila envelope sat unopened in my briefcase all afternoon, its presence like a lead weight against my leg. That evening, I spread everything across our kitchen table: the lab report, time-stamped messages, hotel receipts, and a notarized document listing my non-negotiable boundaries. The overhead light cast harsh shadows on the white papers, making the words seem to float off the surface. I remembered countless dinners at this same table, sharing stories about our days, planning weekend trips we'd never take now. "Noelle?" I called out, my voice steady. "We need to talk." She emerged from her home office, still wearing her work clothes, reading glasses perched on her head. Her expression shifted from curious to guarded when she saw the papers. "What's all this?" She remained standing, arms crossed. "Please sit down." I gestured to the chair across from me. "There are some things we need to discuss." She sat, but her posture remained rigid. I started with the timeline, laying out each piece of evidence methodically, like assembling a puzzle whose picture was already clear to me. "This is the DNA test from Central Labs," I said, sliding the report toward her. "Dr. Patel supervised it personally. The results are conclusive. I'm not the father." Noelle's face drained of color. She stared at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. "That's impossible. These tests can be wrong. Dr. Patel's lab has a 99.9% accuracy rate. The chain of custody is documented on page 3. My voice remained calm, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Her eyes welled up, right on cue. "How could you do this behind my back, after everything we've built together?" "Everything we built was supposed to be founded on trust," I replied, keeping my tone even. "The company retreat was 8 weeks ago. The dates align perfectly with the conception timeline. So you're just going to abandon us?" Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "Your own child?" "Not my child, Noelle. We both know that." I slid the notarized boundaries list toward her. "These are my terms. Separate accounts starting tomorrow, no acknowledgement of paternity, and full disclosure to HR by morning." "You're being paranoid." Her voice cracked with desperation. "This isn't like you, Logan. We can work through this." "I won't father a lie." The words came out quiet but firm. "You're throwing away 10 years of marriage over one mistake?" She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. I pulled back. "This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Multiple choices made over time with clear intent." Her expression hardened then, tears vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. She snatched up the lab report, her fingers crumpling the edges. "You heartless bastard," she hissed, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "You and your precious evidence, your boundaries, your rules." The lab report hit the floor with a soft thwack, pages scattering across the tile. Noelle's footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by the sharp slam of our bedroom door. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the scattered papers that held my future. The central ceiling light hummed above me, casting my shadow over the truth I'd fought so hard to uncover. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse before dawn. The steering wheel felt cold under my hands, and my breath fogged the windshield until the heater kicked in. Traffic was light, too early for the regular commute, too late for the night shift heading home. I remembered driving this same route years ago to get our marriage license, Noelle beside me chattering about wedding plans. Now I carried divorce papers in a manila folder on the passenger seat, along with the pre-birth order contesting paternity. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. Security hadn't formed their usual line yet, and my footsteps echoed through the marble lobby. I'd arranged to meet Nate early. He was already waiting by the clerk's office, travel mug in hand. "Morning," he said, voice pitched low for the quiet building. "You ready?" I nodded, pulling out the folder. We'd spent hours yesterday preparing everything, making sure each exhibit was properly labeled and every signature line identified. The lab results from Dr. Patel were attached as Exhibit A, followed by the timeline and supporting documentation. "Remember," Nate said, "file the divorce petition first, then the pre-birth order. We want separate case numbers to protect against consolidation attempts." The clerk's window opened at exactly 8:00 a.m. I approached, shoulders straight, and slid the first set of papers across. The clerk's stamp came down with a heavy thunk that seemed to echo through my chest. One by one, I signed where indicated, collecting filing receipts as we went. "Make sure you get copies of everything," Nate reminded me quietly. My hand was steady as I wrote my name again and again. Each signature felt like another brick in the wall between my old life and whatever came next. The clerk processed both filings efficiently, barely glancing up as she handed over the certified copies. "All set," she said, already turning to the next person in line. I carefully organized the receipts and copies into my folder while Nate reviewed everything one last time. By 8:45 a.m., we were walking back to our cars. "Good work," Nate said, clapping my shoulder. "I'll file the notice of appearance this afternoon. Try to get some rest." Rest seemed unlikely, but I nodded anyway. The drive home felt longer, heavier with the weight of what I'd done. It was after 9 when I finally walked through my front door. The house was silent. Noelle had already left for work. I heard a mechanical whir from the home office and followed the sound. Our printer was running, warm to the touch. In the output tray lay a single sheet of paper that made my blood run cold, an acknowledgement of paternity form, already filled out. My signature was there at the bottom, a shaky trace job I recognized from our mortgage paperwork. Attached was a courier slip, scheduled for delivery to Metropolitan Hospital's Records Department. The delivery date aligned with Noelle's next prenatal appointment. I held the paper under the desk lamp, studying the forged signature. The strokes were hesitant, clearly copied rather than natural. Even after the DNA test, even after my explicit boundaries, even after the legal filings, she'd still tried to trap me. My heart beat slow and hard against my ribs as I gripped the forged document. The printer's display still showed the job details, damning evidence of how recent this attempt had been. What I held wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was fraud, plain and simple. I called Nate first thing the next morning, my voice tight as I described the forged document. The phone felt slick against my palm while I detailed every aspect. The traced signature, the courier slip, the printer timestamp. "Send me photos," Nate said. "Every angle. And don't touch anything else on that printer." I carefully photographed the form, making sure to capture the telltale wobbles in the signature where Noelle had traced over my mortgage documents. The morning sun slanted across my desk, highlighting every hesitation mark in the forgery. "Got them," Nate said after I texted the images. "This changes things. We're not just dealing with infidelity anymore. This is attempted fraud. Give me an hour to make some calls." While I waited, I remembered the day we bought that printer. Noelle had insisted on the expensive model with extra features, saying we'd need it for Christmas cards and birth announcements someday. Now it had become evidence of her deception. Nate called back exactly 60 minutes later. "I've set up a meeting for tomorrow morning. HR compliance, Colin's attorney, all of them. We're going to handle this head on." My stomach tightened. "You think that's the right play?" "They need to see we have everything documented, and Colin needs to understand his career's on the line." Nate's voice carried the calm certainty I needed. "Get your evidence in order, every piece." I spent the next hours assembling everything into a leather portfolio, each section clearly labeled. The DNA test results came first, Dr. Patel's signature bold across the bottom, chain of custody pristine. Next, screenshots of the printer spool history, showing exactly when the forged document was created. The courier order details followed, along with my travel records proving I was away during conception. "Remember," Nate said during our final prep call, "stay controlled tomorrow. Let the evidence speak for itself." That evening, I stood in my home office, double-checking every folder. The leather portfolio sat ready on my desk, containing proof of both personal and professional misconduct. I thought about Colin in his sharp suits, so certain of his authority, about to face consequences he never expected. A memory surfaced. The company Christmas party last year, watching Colin and Noelle share inside jokes across the room. I'd dismissed my unease then. Now, those moments felt like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. I packed my briefcase with the portfolio and a fresh legal pad. The weight of it felt solid in my hand, grounding me. Tomorrow would change everything, but I was ready. Not for revenge, but for justice through proper channels. Standing in my apartment that night, I realized how quiet it had become since Noelle moved out. The silence used to feel empty. Now, it felt like clarity. Morning arrived with steel-gray clouds. I knotted my tie with steady hands, checked my appearance one final time, and lifted the briefcase. The folders inside held enough evidence to shatter careers and end my marriage definitively. But this wasn't about destruction. It was about truth, finally seeing daylight. I walked toward my car, the briefcase firm under my arm. Each step felt deliberate, carrying me toward a confrontation months in the making. The conference room felt sterile and cold as I took my seat across from Colin. His usual corporate polish looked strained this morning, tie slightly askew, a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. Two HR representatives sat to my left, their faces professionally neutral. Colin's attorney perched beside him, yellow legal pad at the ready. Nate cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. "Let's begin with the laboratory findings." His voice carried the precise tone of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. He slid Dr. Patel's affidavit across the polished table surface. "This DNA test conclusively excludes Mr. Price as the biological father. Note the chain of custody signatures and Dr. Patel's certification." I watched Colin's eyes track the document, his jaw tightening as he read. The memory of countless office parties flashed through my mind, him holding court, so sure of his untouchability. Now he couldn't meet my gaze. "Additionally," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we have evidence of attempted fraud." I placed the printer records on the table, followed by the courier slip. "This shows a forged acknowledgement of paternity form, created using my traced signature, scheduled for hospital delivery." The senior HR representative leaned forward, frowning as she examined the documents. Her colleague began taking rapid notes. "These accusations are—" Colin's attorney started, but Colin himself shifted awkwardly in his chair, cutting off the objection. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "The timeline aligns perfectly with the company retreat," Nate continued, laying out the hotel receipts and travel records. "And the messages between Mr. Marks and Mrs. Price demonstrate clear misconduct." Colin's attempts at composure cracked further. "This is a personal matter," he stammered, tugging at his collar. "It has nothing to do with—" "This occurred during a company event, Mr. Marks," the HR compliance officer interrupted. Her tone could have frozen water. "Using company resources while you were in a supervisory position." She turned to her colleague. "Suspend his system access immediately. We'll need to launch a full investigation." I kept my breathing even, watching the career confidence drain from Colin's face. His attorney scribbled frantically, but we all knew where this was heading. The careful documentation left no room for denial. "We'll need your company phone and laptop before you leave today," the compliance officer continued, "and you're suspended pending investigation results." Colin slumped slightly, the reality of his actions finally catching up to him. All those careful plans, all that calculated deception, exposed by simple, methodical truth. I gathered my copies of the documents while Nate handled the final procedural details. The weight that had pressed against my chest for months began to lift, just slightly. Not gone completely, but lighter. Standing up, I straightened my jacket and picked up my briefcase. Colin still sat there, staring at the evidence spread before him, his professional world unraveling document by document. I walked out of the conference room without looking back, each step carrying me closer to resolution, even as I knew the courtroom phase still waited ahead. 3 weeks dragged like 3 years before our court date arrived. The family courthouse hadn't changed since my last visit. Same worn wooden benches, same faded motivational posters about justice, same smell of old paper and anxiety. I adjusted my tie, remembering how my dad taught me the Windsor knot in front of his bedroom mirror. "A man faces hard moments looking his best," he'd said. Nate sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, documents arranged with military precision. Noelle and her attorney occupied the other side, her designer blazer a stark contrast to the simple cream blouse she used to wear when we first met. Strange how memory sneaks up on you in these moments. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Honorable Judge Herrera presiding." Judge Herrera entered with purposeful steps, her dark hair streaked with distinguished gray. She settled into her chair, reviewing our file with careful attention. "We're here on the matter of Price versus Price," she stated, specifically regarding the petition for a pre-birth order of non-paternity. Her gaze swept the courtroom. "Counsel, proceed." Nate stood, his posture reflecting years of courtroom confidence. "Your Honor, we submit as evidence a DNA test excluding my client as the biological father. The test was conducted by Dr. Arjun Patel at Central Medical Laboratory, with full chain of custody maintained." He approached the bench with the documentation. "Dr. Patel's affidavit confirms both the testing protocol and results." Judge Herrera examined the papers carefully. I watched her eyes track each detail, each signature. My pulse steadied. The truth had a weight all its own. Noelle's attorney rose next. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the test results, my client wishes to stress the emotional bonds and marital commitment." "Counselor," Judge Herrera interrupted, holding up one hand. "The science here is unambiguous. This court deals in facts, not emotional appeals." She turned a page in the file, The DNA exclusion is clear, properly documented, and admissible. I felt Nate's slight nod beside me. We'd prepared for dramatic arguments, but Judge Herrera's focus on evidence cut straight through. Furthermore, she continued, the attempt to file a fraudulent acknowledgement of paternity raises serious concerns. Her tone carried the chill of disappointed authority. This court cannot ignore such a deliberate attempt to circumvent proper legal process. Noelle shifted in her chair. I kept my eyes forward, remembering all those nights I'd spent staring at our wedding photo, trying to understand how we'd arrived here. Judge Herrera set down the papers and looked directly at me. Mr. Price, based on the conclusive DNA evidence provided and Dr. Patel's sworn testimony, this court grants your petition for non-paternity. She picked up her gavel. You are hereby legally established as not the father of the child in question. Order so entered. The gavel struck wood with finality. The sound echoed through the hushed courtroom, marking the moment justice aligned with truth. I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. One battle won. The divorce still loomed ahead, but this victory, this protection of my name and future, landed like armor around my shoulders. Not yet free, but standing firmly on solid ground. The divorce settlement arrived on my desk exactly 2 months after Judge Herrera's paternity ruling. My signature had grown steadier since those first courthouse filings, muscle memory from all the documents that marked my path to freedom. I traced each letter carefully, making it official. Everything's protected, Nate confirmed, sliding the papers into his briefcase. Separate assets maintained, no ongoing obligations, clean break. He gave me a knowing look. You did this right, Logan. Kept your head when most would have lost theirs. I nodded, thinking of all the nights I'd spent building spreadsheets instead of throwing things. The methodical approach had paid off. My retirement accounts, investments, and the small cabin I'd inherited from my grandfather all remained solely in my name. The settlement even included specific language preventing any future claims related to the child. How are you feeling? Nate asked, his voice carrying the warmth of old friendship. Like I can breathe again, I answered honestly. The tightness that had lived in my chest for months had finally started to loosen. It's not the ending I wanted when I got married, but it's the one I needed when I found the truth. Later that evening, I stood in my garage, staring at the half-built crib in the corner. I'd started it the weekend before, discovering the lies, when hope still lived in simple wood and measurements. The pieces I'd carefully sanded now felt like artifacts from another life. Moonlight filtered through the dusty windows as I ran my hand along the smooth rails. I remembered how proud I'd felt selecting the cherry wood, planning the joinery that would make it last generations. Now it represented something else, the future I'd almost been trapped into versus the one I'd chosen by standing firm. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake thinking about integrity, about how sometimes the hardest path is the only one that lets you keep your soul intact. When dawn finally broke, I knew what I needed to do. The women's shelter opened early. I'd called ahead, confirming they accepted furniture donations. The morning air felt crisp as I carefully loaded the crib into my truck. Each piece still carried the marks of my careful craftsmanship, the routed edges, the precisely drilled holes, the gentle curves I'd shaped with such anticipation. The shelter's donation area was quiet at this hour. Sunlight streamed through high windows as I carried in the pieces, setting them gently against the wall. The wood felt warm under my hands, as if it held some echo of the love I'd poured into its making. But instead of aching, the feeling brought peace. Someone else's child would sleep here, someone who needed it more than my pride needed to destroy it. Thank you for the donation, the shelter coordinator said softly, noting my careful placement. It's beautiful work. I straightened up, feeling taller than I had in months. It deserves to help someone, I replied simply. Walking back to my truck, I thought about everything I'd learned, about how victory sometimes looks like letting go, about how standing firm doesn't mean standing still, about how truth, backed by paper and patience, speaks louder than any shout ever could. The sun had fully risen now, painting the sky in shades of new beginnings. I took a deep breath, tasting freedom in the morning air. After all the chaos and pain, one lesson rang clearer than all others. Paper beats noise when you stand firm.